Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Adults Table. I am Rabbi Mike Harvey, your guide into the deep corners of our sacred texts.
And I'm Rion. Once a devoted, dogmatic Christian, I now approach religious traditions with an open and questioning mind.
Friends, this is not your boobies Bible study. Our goal is to encourage you to question, to probe, to uncover truths that might lie just beyond our inherited beliefs.
Last week's dive into the B'nai Elohim was super fun for me because I'm gaining an understanding of the pantheon of deities that predate and potentially influence our perception of Yahweh, utilizing new skills that I've learned.
And with these right tools and knowledge, we can gain a profound respect and understanding of these ancient civilizations that have shaped our beliefs, sometimes without us even knowing it. And here at the Adults Table, we present insights that might challenge your worldview. And sometimes, friends, the truth that you thought is open into interpretation.
So, wherever you are on your spiritual journey or lack thereof, that could be possible, we invite you to join our discussion, pull up a chair, and we will be right back.
Right back.
The Adults Table Theological Conversations Uncensored.
Woohoo!
Howdy ho, neighboroonies.
Howdy ho, friends. Welcome. Do you want to announce how many subscribers we have, or should I?
Oh, it's a fun number. Let's say it
Yeah.
at the exact same time. The exact same. We have
Okay.
to do it. Let's
Ready?
count to 69.
Oh, 69 subscribers.
Whoop, whoop, 69.
Hey. Thanks,
That's
guys.
awesome.
Never change it. This is good. We're fine at this
Yeah,
number.
nobody else. We
Nobody
don't
else. You
we
know,
don't want a single person.
that's fine. It's awesome. So, welcome, friends. Super excited about tonight's lesson. We have, for the last few sessions, really tried to look at and expand views of motif adaptation. So if you have looked at the last few episodes, you'll see that we really focused on certain situations in a larger view of what genre and motif adaptation was like from outside cultures, from within, speaking about B'nai Elohim, the pantheon, and that sort of motif. We spoke about the flood motif. We did all of these sort of things. So to solidify that, what I'm going to bring to you tonight, and Ryan and I are going to bring to you, is a lesson that speaks about one of the many lessons that speaks about motif adaptation, which occurs within the Torah itself. And it's a great lesson to really put you on that journey of being able to track these things, very similar in the way that we did so with the flood motif. We're going to do literary stations and break things up that way again. But we are going to put, this sort of strategy. We're going to give you these tools to show, and there's multiple incidents of these, but this one is one of the major ones that's easiest to track and easiest to see. So I wanted to bring to you guys, in case it was a little bit confusing seeing all this other stuff, I wanted to give you like a basic view of, here's a plain view of motif adaptation. We're going to read through it. We're going to talk through it. And then you guys should have it and should be ready to go. So that's the plan tonight.
Drive it home.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about intertextuality again, which is really a big thing that we've been doing lately, which is texts that interact with each other. We've talked about texts that are from multiple cultures that interact with, the Near Eastern cultures interacting with Israelite culture and the Torah. We've talked about two texts written about the same thing that are doing that, right? So all these texts that literally have conversations with each other and affect each other. This is all part of motif adaptation. So we're going to be doing the rock water what's called the rock water motif adaptations. And if you go to seminary, if you study this at master's and PhD levels, my guess is that you have at the very least looked at this. And so one of the main things that we are trying to do here at the adults table is take those lessons that scholars get, that rabbis and pastors and priests and stuff like that get, and bridge that gap a little bit so that you, our listeners and our watchers, can have these tools too. It shouldn't just be us who are studying this on higher level education, but you who open the Bible every day, and you who want to study on your own or going on your own spiritual journey, as Ryan said, you should have access to these tools too. So that's another main reason to do that.
It really does help to kind of conceptualize things. It's like I've known a lot of this information before. I've been reading it, but now it really is starting to click in place, and I can't really say it other than that. It's just making these boxes kind of tick, and this circle is starting to be like coming full circle, I guess I should say.
Yeah. And hopefully that's the plan, is that you feel more empowered every time you open up a piece of text, a piece of biblical literature or Near Eastern literature, or something you just see that you say, hey, I've done some study on this, and I've got some skills. Okay. So, and Stuart, Shana Tova, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very nice of you. Yes, we just celebrated Rosh Hashanah, so thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to add it to
On the
stage.
table.
We're going to, oh, you know what? Let's put it on the table.
Let's put it on the table. Hey-o.
Put it on there. Is there a way to, there we go. Okay, perfect. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, again, very, very briefly talk about these skill sets. Okay. Remember that a genre is when you walk into a library and you see fiction, nonfiction, comedy, recipe, whatever it is, right? It's the big idea of the story, and multiple genres exist inside the Bible. If you guys have not figured that out yet, that the Bible is a library, not one book. It is full of different genres, full of different genres. And we did that awesome study in our first class about reading and how to identify a genre, whether it be a recipe or a fairy tale. Typically, we know through our own experience of our cultural repertoire what genre we're in. So, for instance, if you read Once Upon a Time, you realize we're in a fairy tale genre. If you read Boil Pasta, you're in a recipe. And it's important not to mix those sort of ideas, those themes. The way that you think about one genre is different from the way that you think about another. And so if you haven't seen that episode, go back to see our first episode, and that will be sort of an overview in that way. The motif
watch them all, damn it.
Oh, watch them all anyway, right? Yeah. Watch it
what
anyway.
Are you doing, damn it? Yeah. Wait till we're done here, please.
Right, exactly. But yes, we're like SVU episodes, okay? So you can just come right in the middle of season 14 and watch it, and you're fine. You know the big players, but go back and watch so that you know what's been going on, okay?
Exactly.
So the motif, theme, or an idea or structure of things that we would only be able to recognize if it's been repeated, which we have been able to do actually sometimes within our own studies here. Like last week with B'nai Elohim, we had some aha moments about like, holy moly, that was something. And the only way we recognize it is putting it next to the other one. And it was super cool, right? So yeah, so that was super cool. So a motif, we're going to see the outline, the structure of a kind of theme or an idea, not as big as a genre, but we can see it. And we use literary trope to identify, okay, like Once Upon a Time or Boil 2 cups of water or whatever it is. So the motif adaptation for rock water, okay, What we're talking about is Exodus 17, 1 through 7, and Numbers 21, 1 through 13. And I'm going to shut up for a moment because I want to hear Ryan's beautiful voice. So
Oh,
we can have you read, if you would, story 1, which is going to be Exodus 17, 1 through 7. Now, when we're reading this, okay, we're not focusing on the meta narrative right now, meaning what came before it, what's going to come after it. We're not focusing on our theological glasses, right, that we've been put on of who these
mm,
characters are, what we're doing, what we think of God, what blah, blah, blah. We're just going to read this story and we're going to start to see what we see from there. Okay. So, Ryan, grace us with your beautiful voice and tell
love
us a
it. All
story.
of the assembled people of Israel traveled from the wilderness of Sin to their states on behalf of Yahweh, and they camped at Rephidim. There was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "Give us water, give us water for us to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test Yahweh?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" Moses cried out to Yahweh, saying, "What will I do for these people? In a little more time, they will stone me." Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rod with you which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will be elders of Israel." The place was named Massa and Meribah, and the people of Israel quarreled and tested Yahweh, saying, "Is Yahweh in our midst or not?"
Okay.
Mm,
So great story, right?
yeah.
Want to do a couple things, and then I want to see, Ryan, what your first sort of reactions are. One thing I want to let you know is that sin is not sin. Okay,
Right.
the
Yeah.
name of it is sin, and that is a Hebrew word, not the English word. So take off your Christianity glasses there. Okay. Um,
Right.
and then Masa and Meribah are wordplay in terms of quarrel and in our midst and that sort of stuff. So that's where
Oh, interesting.
things are named, right? The names of places based on what occurred in that way. And so those are sort of little bits to know. The last thing I will tell you is that we're only going to be speaking about two aspects here in terms of motif adaptation of two stories, but the wilderness narrative of the complaint scenes, there are like 13 of them from Exodus to Numbers, in terms
Oh,
of the Israelites like rebelling or complaining about something. And
disdain.
so yeah, it's a very used motif, but this particular motif, the rock water motif, is much more specific. We're going to do so. Ryan, what are your sort of reactions to what's going on here in the wilderness of sin?
Well, just knowing that, oh, sorry, Pickle, I just kicked her in the head, that water is symbolic of life. I mean, we've mentioned that before. Also, there's other meanings behind it,
Mhm.
but um, it's interesting that the water comes from the rock,
Mhm.
and also knowing that rocks have significance, which I'm not really sure. This is kind of one of those things I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Does this have anything to do with trying to conceptualize Yahweh as a rock, whereas he used to be a rock? There used to
Mm,
be like physical representation, but now he's just conceptualized as this rock, this idea of strength,
mm,
steadfastness, and
right.
also everlasting life pouring from it. I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of like a vomit of
Yeah,
words
yeah.
there, but
No,
that's all
no.
like the
All of that is
ideas that are coming to my head when I reading this.
Yeah, all of it is great midrash. All of it is like, what is the symbolism of water issuing from a rock? Why a rock?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Right. It's a strange image. It's an interesting sort of story of how that happens. And then focus on what needs to happen, right? Remember that a few chapters ago, because we're in Exodus 17, right? So we're just coming over the Sea of Reeds, right? We've just crossed over it. We're not very far removed from this big miracle of saving us from Egypt, right? And then here we are,
Right.
and they're already kvetching, they're already complaining, saying, um, you know, why, why did we come with you? Um, and and he talks about he took the rod which he struck the Nile. If you remember, he strikes the Nile, and the Nile becomes blood. Right, that's one of the plagues. He also outstretches his hand with the staff, and the water splits. So there's all kinds of
Right.
stuff going on in terms of magic and miracles and things like that. This
Yeah,
is
there's a lot with the
right,
rod even itself
right,
too, knowing like what the
exactly,
rod might
exactly.
represent.
So there's lots of stuff here, but basically what we're seeing is Moses gets a kvetchy crowd. They're thirsty. They're in the middle of nowhere, right? They're in the wilderness, and he says, um, "Oh, great question, Deanne. I'm going to show you a map in a moment to give you sort of a place as to where this is." Um, but anyway, so there's this. They're looking for. They need a miracle in this case of water, so they don't die, basically. And so from
Right.
nothing comes, from this rock or whatever it is, comes water. So this is this first story of what we call the rock water stories of Exodus 17:1-7. And again, we're not very removed from the 10 plagues, from the big pillars of fire and splitting of the sea. And so the fact that the Israelites are saying, why did you bring us up from Egypt, right, to kill us and children, like whatever it is pretty crappy to say. Like this is the same generation, right, of people who saw all these miracles, and they're just like, we're
Ugh,
thirsty.
is he here or
Why?
not?
Like we were like, right, is there a God or not? I forgot about this. Um,
I already
so
forgot.
so yeah, so they're very kvetchy, right?
Oh.
But one of the things that should pop into our mind is that that doesn't make a lot of sense. People aren't that stubborn and stiff necked. So we should think to ourselves as this perhaps was a story that was pulled elsewhere and brought in, where the meta narrative doesn't make a great deal of sense, because it makes really no sense that people would say kvetch this early. But you never know. Maybe we are that stiff necked. You never know. Maybe we are that stubborn. So this is story one. So if we scroll down, we've got story two. And one of the things I want you to notice is the length. Okay, so here's story one, right?
Yeah.
And then here's story two.
Oh wow,
Story
13.
two
The other one was
is
7.
quite a bit longer. Okay. Um, and this is typical in terms of when we see two stories together, or more than one story together, like three stories together, that they expand and they grow with each redaction and author. Okay, so a good rule
Mm.
of thumb is the shortest one is usually the original or the
Ah,
first adaptation, and then the longer
okay.
ones typically have, and that makes sense, right? Because you're building off more stories, are later
Mhm.
adaptations. That's the rule of thumb. Not all the time, but that's like a good idea. So what we're going to go into this thinking that Exodus 17 came first, and then here in Numbers 21:13 comes story number two. So hit
Okay.
us, Ryan. 20
Hit
Numbers
it.
1-13. Do
The
it.
Israel the Israelites came as a group to the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. It was there Miriam died and was buried there. There was no water for the people, and they assembled against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "If only we had perished with our brothers before Yahweh. What have you brought to the congregation of Yahweh to this wilderness to die here, us and our beasts? Why did you take us from Egypt to bring us to this terrible place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates or water to drink?" Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell upon their faces. I would too. The presence
Yeah.
of Yahweh appeared to them, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother take the rod and assemble the community and speak to the rock before their eyes to give its water, and you will bring forth water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." Moses took the rod from before Yahweh as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, we will get water for you out of this rock. Will we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hands and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came much water, and the community and their beast drank. But Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you will not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them." Those are the waters of Meribah, meaning that the Israelites quarreled with Yahweh, through which he affirmed his sanctity.
Thank you.
Whew.
So first of all, there should be some things that pop up that are just like, what the crap? What the crap, man? What were some of the things that you read that were like, what the crap?
Well, that's a good question. Now that I'm reading this thinking, okay, this is the one that's been built upon. This okay, so this one is a bit longer. There's a little more communication between the two.
Right, right.
Um, I wonder why this time he struck the rod twice. That was interesting to me.
Okay, right. So
Now there's a
first time he
tent of
strikes it
meeting. So
once,
now there's even like a holy
right?
place, and Moses and Aaron are, I don't know what you would call that. Not humble, they're beseeching, maybe?
Maybe,
Begging
right?
almost of
Right,
sorts. Or just so damn upset. They're like, "Oh, let me just freaking put my head in the sand. I
right,
can't stand these people."
right. So a good way to look at these stories is in terms of motif adaptation, right? Is would we be able to switch the stories from one to the other, and would it make sense in terms of the meta narrative? And right away, we
Mm,
should be able to say right away the answer would be no for a couple reasons, right? One, we're at a different place. We're at Zin, not Sin,
mm,
right? And that is purposeful. That's a different name.
hmm.
Two, Miriam is dead, right? So we could not go switch it back to the Exodus because Miriam is alive in Exodus,
Mm,
right? So Miriam is dead in this one. Two,
right,
that was two.
right.
So three, um, the the ending is fascinating. Um, Moses and Aaron are banned from going into the land of Canaan because he struck a rock, which by the way is like absurd in terms of like if you have read the rest of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, Moses does all kinds of shit, and um, this is what is like the final. This is like, hey man,
Right, this is the straw?
do what you want, but don't hit my rocks, okay? And like that's like absurd a little bit. So main thing, right, is that we can't because of the meta narrative, we can't switch them, okay? But there are some switchable, some things that wouldn't matter, right? They go somewhere, they complain there's no water.
Mhm.
Um, they quarrel against the leadership, right? But in Exodus, it's just Moses. Here, it's Moses and Aaron. Um, and there's a rock involved with water, right? Now, the main thing that we should are if we were reading this in Exodus, and then the next, I don't know how long it takes you to read from Exodus to Numbers, but when you get to Numbers, you'd be like, wait a minute. Last time he was commanded to hit the rock, right? And water came out. God commanded him to
Mhm.
hit the rock. God asks him to speak to the rock this time, but
Oh,
Moses hits
yeah.
the rock. And so in one, hitting the rock
Huh.
is good. Here, hitting the rock is bad, which again is also wackadoodle, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if we go
That
back
is
up
so
here,
interesting. He says, "Speak to the rock."
Right, exactly. So in Exodus, right, strike the rock. That's right. Smell what the rock is cooking.
And smell what the rock is cooking. It's
Strike the
water.
rock, and water will issue from it. Right
Right.
here, he has like his own little. Hey, dipshits, fine. You want water?
He
I'll give
calls
you
them
water.
rebels.
Right. But he says he raised the hand and struck the rock. Right. So look, he
He
did it
said, tap,
here.
tap,
He did it here. Right. Give it the old tappy tappy. Right.
tap,
Tap tap
tap.
taparoo. Um, and out came much water. Right. But he says, speak to the rock. So first of all, what's he going to say? Like,
Hey, how
hey,
you
rock.
doing?
Right? Maybe he was knocking. Maybe he was like, are you there?
Maybe.
Or something. Anyway,
He wanted
super
it to
weird.
be consensual. He wanted
Right.
to make sure he
Exactly.
had permission of
Super
the
weird.
rock.
Right. But he hits it just like he hit it before, only this time it's the wrong thing. He violates God's sanctity by doing so. And this is it. And by the way, poor Aaron. Aaron didn't hit the rock. Moses did. But
Right.
Aaron's not getting into the land either. Right? So this is a troublesome story by itself in lots of ways. And we'll talk about um, what the theory is behind this, which is actually like really cool.
Oh,
After we
cool.
get
Good.
to motif adaptation and stuff like that. But here are the two stories, and don't worry, we're going to see them side by side. You don't need to memorize it. So here's a little map, okay, from if we are tracking, and this is through the biblical narrative, not any archaeological anything. This is the biblical narrative where they start up here in at one right at the top left here, right, Ramses, and they lead right.
Mm-hmm.
They go over the Red Sea, and then they're going down, right, and then right at around 6 here is Wilderness of Sin. So
Mm-hmm.
south, right, Rephidim, that area, right. Then they go to Sinai. They get the Ten
Yep.
Commandments, right? And then they go up, and then they take a nice loop de loop right here.
Knock
From
on a couple
11 to
people's
12,
doors. Can I
right? They're
come
just
through?
wasting time. They're just window shopping, right? Um, and then right at the top here, but above 12, near Beersheba, is the wilderness of Zin. So one of the main things of the meta narrative here is that you can't switch them because the wilderness of Sin is down here. The wilderness of Zin is way up here, which means that would not
Oh,
work.
snap.
Okay. So
Stop. Damn.
meaning
How did I
that this
not
had to
notice
be changed,
this?
right? This had to be changed, which means that parts of the motif are changed to make sense in the meta narrative, right? We're
Right.
going to use the same story, but they got to change some things. Is it like funny, haha, weird that they used Zin instead of Sin? Yes. But also remind ourselves that those are the waters of Meribah, is how Numbers ends. The place is named Massah and Meribah in the first one. So they didn't do that great of a job. They
Right.
just said, yeah, we can call that one Meribah also, I guess.
That
Um,
works.
not great. So, but that's the idea in terms of that. And so not a lot of these wilderness of exist anymore, but there are. This is where, if we were digging archaeologically, we would call them wilderness of sin, wilderness of Zin. But there are other places that we do recognize on this map that are real places, right? In terms of where we're talking in the Sinai Peninsula. This is
Right.
where we're at. Okay. So what we did last time was we did literary stations, and we're going to do it again. Okay, I'm going to set them up for you, and I'm going to show you, like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put these two stories next to each other synoptically, right?
Ooh.
First one and that one. And then we're going to use what we call literary stations, meaning we're going to organize these things by the motif and see what works and what didn't, right? What was there and what wasn't.
There's so many daggone motifs.
Okay. So the motif that we're talking about here is going to be the things that work in the literary stations together. The things that are not are the other stuff. So whenever we're talking about motif adaptation, we can change the place, we can change the names of the people, we can change the outcome, but there are certain aspects within that motif that have to stay the same because it's been adapted. So it's like if you're remixing a song, you're going to keep the beat or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, you got to keep
You
something
got to
of
keep
the
some parts,
part of
otherwise
it.
you're not going to know it's a remix. So
Right.
this Numbers is a remix of Exodus, but there are things that are new, right, to make it a different story, right? So that's what we're talking about here. So if we read from our literary stations, the opening context, basically every story that you get to within the wilderness narrative, Exodus to Numbers here, is going to have like a preamble, an opening, like what's going on. Meanwhile, here in Sinai, okay, this is what's going on.
The narrator
Okay,
voice.
right, exactly. The narrative has to let us know what's next. Okay, because remember, there was no verses or chapter numbers or anything like that in the Torah. It was just story by story by story. And so, if you didn't have what happened, where was I?
Yeah,
Whatever.
like what's bleeding into what? Like you've got
Exactly. Exactly.
makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So, um, opening context, right? Take a look at these two and see what are some of the things that are the same, what are the things that are different, right? Um, talk about, think about what's the names of places or people, what's happening in the meta narrative, who's there, who isn't, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
saw right away that Sin and Zin are different places, right? Which means that the author of Numbers had to say, wait a minute, we're not there anymore. We are way up here. So I got to change where we are. But what are people called? What are the people called in each one, right?
Right. And I'm sorry, I don't want to like
No,
jump
go ahead.
in, but curious, is there anything to the fact that Exodus has all of the assembled people of Israel? I know that it says people of Israel, but is it almost saying like it's a little hodgepodge? It's almost like saying like, there's some stragglers in there, but hey, they're Israel. They're Israel now, baby. You're with us now.
So, by the way, the answer is always yes. There is something
Okay.
to it. Yeah. So, like when I
I
when I
like
was in
that.
seminary, I would ask, "Is it possible?" And my professor would go, "Yes, anything's possible." But in this
Right.
case,
Okay.
yes, there is something to it. In the fact that remember what has happened before in Exodus, there's the people of Israel. They just came out of Egypt. They're assembled, whatever it is. By the time they get to Numbers, they've gotten the Ten Commandments. They've done the golden calf. They've done Leviticus stuff. They've gone all right. They are now Israelites. They are
Mhm.
now a group, like an official group of people.
Right.
So Exodus, they're still sort of like a mishmash, whatever it is. By Numbers, they're Israelites. Like we've made it, right? They're like an army at this point, right? Because they're going to start
Cool.
conquering people soon. So, yes, there is something to that. That's exactly what we're talking about. Um,
Dope.
so,
Uh, can I
yeah,
also
go
ask
ahead.
another
Please. Yeah.
question? Maybe this is extra, but I know that Miriam means bitter sea. Do you think that her name at all has anything to do with the fact that there's a lot of water and motif?
Listen, water and Miriam is a
Okay. And
big thing. It's a big thing. So it's yes, it's possible.
right.
It is possible is the answer to that. Yes, it is
Right.
possible. Um, this particular author needed to get rid of Miriam and chose this place to do it. Okay. Now, remember, that if we were to look ahead past Deuteronomy, right? Who goes forward into the land of Canaan? None of these people.
Right. They're all
Miriam,
left in the
Moses,
dust.
and Aaron do not, right? So when the book of Joshua begins, they are not in Canaan, which means that eventually these characters need to be killed off or not let in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So another lesson that I'm going to teach another time is that it is thought that in Numbers, the book of Deuteronomy was added later. Take out the entire book of Deuteronomy. Moses dies and it goes straight to Joshua. Numbers, Joshua. Okay. And
Okay.
so now imagine that that's how it was supposed to be. Deuteronomy shows up. Moses is still alive. And now people in Numbers have to say, wait a minute, what about these main characters? We got to kill them off. And Miriam dies, and Moses and Aaron are not let in because of this ridiculous excuse, right? Of hitting a rock,
Yeah.
which he hit 2 chapters ago, 2 books ago.
And it seemed to be cool.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Um,
Interesting.
yes. Stu, I would say rock honey is its own sort of thing, but again, it's possible. It's possible. You never know. Everything's possible.
Rock honey.
Rock honey. Okay. So, what is different here in terms of the next literary station, right? Moses says to them, "Hey man, what do you want with me? I'm not saying there's no water. Why do you quarrel with me, right? And then why are you testing Yahweh, right? Numbers, Moses does not even get defensive. Later, he deals with some anger issues, but he does not get defensive, right? He does not say, why do you quarrel with me? Why? Probably because this has happened already with the complaint scenes over and over and over again. By the time Numbers comes around, it wouldn't make much sense for Moses to be like, hey, man, why are you asking me? At this point,
Right.
he's done with them. He's like, we've heard this already. Like, I know what you're doing, right? So the adapter in Numbers takes out the defensive behavior because it doesn't make any sense from a meta narrative point of view in terms of this is Exodus is probably one of the first times that they've complained, and he's like, why are you complaining to me? Numbers, he's like, they've been complaining to me for 2 books.
Ugh.
Like, I get it. People, right?
Over it.
Ugh, Jews. Anyway, so
Oh my god. Signing off.
It's all right. I'm a rabbi. I can say that. So then we've got what's called the escalation of the complaint, meaning it's not just that they want water. This escalation, this kind of complaint is actually really well known in terms of these complaint scenes, but these are the ones to use it, right? Why did you bring us from Egypt, right? Now look at the first one and the second one. This is a beautiful example of someone saying,
that complaint.
I want to expand this a little bit more. Like, let's talk about figs and vines and pomegranates and all that luscious stuff from Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, let's indulge a little bit here with my, why did you take us to this terrible place instead of like, what are you just going to kill us, right? In Exodus, right? So this is a great scene in terms of motif adaptation, being like, I like this, but I'm going to gloss it up a little and make it a little, make it a little snazzy nazzy, okay? That's what we're going to do.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
It is cool. I didn't realize.
I know. Super cool, right? And then, right, we've got what's called the request for divine intervention, meaning, and now this is different from defensive behavior, with Moses says, why are you quarreling with me, dude? In the request for divine intervention, Moses goes to Yahweh, right? And then in the second one, Moses and Aaron go to Yahweh. Now, we have a different meta-narrative aspect because in Exodus, the tabernacle has not been built yet, which means the tent of meeting has not been built yet. So in Numbers, now they've got the tent of meeting that they can go into and fall on their faces and get a little
Right.
privacy in their what the heck do I do situation here.
Mm.
So again, the motif had to shift a little bit to say, this is where they would have to go. They'd have to go to the tent of meeting to do this. But the thing is, the idea is the same, right? In terms of, okay, you complain to us. Now we're going to go complain to Yahweh and say, do something about these people, right?
Right.
Cool.
Yes.
So very, very important to keep our eyes on the meta narrative in terms of where they were in Exodus versus where they were in Numbers, because there are things that you will notice when you put these stories together that the author had to think about when using this motif. He had Exodus in front of him, but he had to add what else there was to do this. Okay.
Okay.
So then we go to divine intervention. Okay. So divine intervention basically means Yahweh gives out the instructions. Here's what you do. Okay. No worries.
Mm.
I got this. In Exodus, he says, pass before the people, walk among them, take with you some elders of Israel. Why do you think he wants elders of Israel to go with him?
Witnesses?
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. A
Like,
little bit
oh
of
damn, did
backup.
you see that?
A little bit of backup to be like, who's in charge? This guy. Okay. Remember
Who's
that
the guy
time
with
I hit
one
the rock?
rod and two thumbs?
Right? Exactly. Remember that time I hit some rock and got some water? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Okay. So
That Rich Farm
Pepperidge
remembers.
Farm remembers. Okay. Um, so he says, I'll stand there. I'll stand there with you at the rock, whatever that
He's
means.
even going to
Right?
be there,
Yahweh's going to be right up
supposedly.
there, standing next to him, saying, like, I got you, brother. Right?
Is that when he carried him and they saw footprints in the
Oh,
sand?
no.
I'm
God.
sorry. He
No.
said, what? What?
No. No. Right? At the
No.
times of my hardest, I only saw one set of footprints. Yeah, I was dealing with the other 6 billion people on Earth at that time. Anyway,
Oh,
no.
shoot.
But there is something to be said about the anthropomorphization here of Yahweh, meaning that I will stand with you, right, is a
Mm,
particular view of Yahweh, right? And
right.
still
And they
very
kept it
anthro.
in both
Right. Not
present.
omnipresent. So we see that like God is not omnipresent in either ones. He likes the imagery of I'm going to stand with you, right?
Right.
And there you go. Oh, wait a minute. Did I do this wrong?
Oh, I don't know.
Did I do this wrong? Oh no, is that the same one? Holy moly. Did anybody else notice that? Hang on. Hang
I
on.
didn't.
Hang on. This might be a divine typo. Numbers. Numbers.
I love a good divine typo.
Right? 1 through 13.
God had a lot of
What's
editors,
the
so that's okay.
you and your brother take the rod. Oh, I totally did. Stupid. Okay. Um, okay, that was stupid. So what I'm gonna do is forget this right here, because that's basically the same one. That's stupid. Um where was I? Yeah, this was stupid. This is the same one as the other one. So ignore
Oopies.
that. Ignore that. I'm going to show you what it really is supposed to say. Oh, darn it. Okay. So we're gonna share. Sorry.
We forgive you. It's
Thank you.
okay.
Sorry.
It happens.
Sorry. Sorry. Sorry, my man. Sorry, my man. Okay, right here. Okay. Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation. They fell on their faces. The presence of Yahweh appeared to them.
Mm.
And God spoke to Moses, saying, you and your brothers take the rod and assemble the community before their very eyes and order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink from the congregation and their beasts. So very different. He doesn't stand with you.
Okay,
Take
so it
the
is
rod,
different.
right? Assemble the community. Doesn't say the elders, right?
All
Um,
right.
but it does say before their eyes, right? Talk to the rock, and it will provide a drink for. And now the word is congregation, right? A
Mm.
different group name, right? Okay.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Yes. So, um, now back to the typo screen. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, my man. Okay. Here we go. Miracle, right? Um, right here is a little bit of the miracle in Exodus. It's very little. Like Moses did so. God said,
Okay.
do it.
Just a
And
little.
Moses did it. Okay.
That
Very
he
simple.
did it.
This one is okay, a little bit more. Okay. Moses and Aaron assembled
Right.
for the congregation in front of the rock. He said to them, listen, motherfuckers, we will get you some water from this rock. Like this was like that is,
So chill.
so chill. So chill, dog. Moses raises his hand, strikes the rock twice, out came water, and the community or congregation and their beasts drank. Okay.
So why does he word it that way?
Which way? Which
Will he says, "Listen,
oh,
you rebels,
yeah.
will we get water for you out of this rock?" Like,
Right.
dude, you tell me. I thought you were the one who's hitting it. I'm
um
guessing.
I don't know, man. Are we going to? Because I don't know. You're Moses.
Maybe he's
So
just being super sarcastic.
this is one of those like not so great Hebrew to English like
Oh,
things.
okay. I can
Um,
see that.
where it's so let me put it in the Hebrew. Um, it's a different sort of Vayomer lechem, right? Shimuna Hamorim, listen up, rebels. Ha ha is interrogative, meaning like um am I going to do this? Like are you going to make me
Okay.
do this, right? Ha mean hasela hazeh notzi lachem maim, right? It's hard to it's a hard to in English make it make sense.
Okay.
Um but it's hamin hasela, right? It's like it's not a statement like I'm going to get this out of this rock. It's more like you want this? I'm going to give it to you, sort of thing.
Oh,
But again, very hard to with the English translation for sure.
okay. No, I appreciate you explaining that to me because that is a bit strange the
That
way it's
happens a
worded.
lot.
But
That
yeah.
happens a lot, right? Um, it is possible, Stu. It is possible. But that is one of the main questions as to like
Mm,
why speak to it and why is it violence in Numbers but not violence in Exodus? It's the same thing, right?
mm.
Was it did God order violence in Exodus? And then God was like, enough of the violence. Let's just talk to people. Um, in Numbers, but like by itself, it's beautiful, right? In terms of don't hit it, speak to it. Except that 2 books ago, you told me to hit it. Like it's very, standing alone, it's a great midrash about speech instead of violence. But when you go back to Exodus, it doesn't make much sense. So we have to
Mhm.
figure out something that the author had an idea about that we didn't know. Obviously, in Exodus, there's no punishment because they didn't do anything wrong. Moses didn't do anything wrong. Here's what you should do: strike the rock. Moses did it. Hooray. Okay. There's no punishment. Here, there's a big freaking punishment. It's huge. It's massive.
Mm.
Moses, who led them out of Egypt, led them through the wilderness, gave them, wrote down the Torah, gave them the Ten
Right.
Commandments, is not allowed in Canaan because he hit a rock instead of speaking to it. The
Hmm.
rabbis struggle with this one. I'm telling you, it's just not. It's just not good
Yeah,
writing.
I'd
Just not good
love
writing.
to know. I'd love to know. Is
It's
it
just
just
not
one of
good.
those things? It could be one of those things, in ancient times it meant something in the context and it's
It
just
could be.
lost.
That is true,
Or it
but
could just be
also
terrible.
it could just be bad writing, and like that's okay. There is bad writing in the Torah, but the truth is, what scholars like to think is that it was sort of a sloppy edit to get rid of these two characters. There was no other place. We're getting close to the end here. We're getting close to Deuteronomy. We're getting close to and
Gotta
if
tie
Numbers
up those
originally
little loose
jumped
ends.
to Joshua, and in Joshua was written without Moses and Aaron, so the sequel's written, you got to go back and edit the
Oof.
first one
Boy,
and get rid of them so that the fans are like the Moses team, Moses and Aaron are like, what happened? They're not in the sequel? What happened to
right.
them? They had to get rid of them somehow.
That's
And
a
this is the
task.
right
This is
sloppy,
a
but
task.
they had to do it. They had to get rid of them when they were
Hey,
canning them.
I didn't necessarily realize, so I mean, they did a well enough job.
Hey,
With my
exactly.
Christian
Not a lot of
lenses
people
on,
notice this
it
stuff,
worked for me.
but
So
they tie it in a bow. Might be a crappy bow, but they tie it in a bow.
Mhm.
And Moses and Aaron no longer they're not in the book of Joshua anymore. You don't need to worry about it.
Adios.
Now we can film, Return of Joshua or whatever it is. Um, so then you've got the naming of the place, right? Which is a huge thing in these places, in these stories,
There's a
right?
lot of that.
A lot of that going on, right? Um, Now, if we look at these side by side, um, forget Masa, right? Named Masa and Meribah. They're both named Meribah, which is again sloppy editing. We'll just call it the same thing. But listen to why it's called Meribah.
Yeah.
In Exodus, it's called Meribah because the people of Israel quarreled and tested, saying, "Is Yahweh here or not?" That's an interesting moment for us to memorialize. Like the
Right.
people did
That's
not
what you're gonna
know
memorialize?
whether or
Hmm.
not Yahweh existed. Now they do, right? They couldn't do that again in Numbers because it's like you didn't forget that Yahweh existed. This time it means Israelites quarreled with Yahweh through which he affirmed his sanctity. And by the way, yes, it's confusing. He affirmed his sanctity. What? What does that mean?
Yeah,
What does that mean?
affirmations.
Right.
You look in the mirror and Yahweh tells you you're beautiful.
Right, exactly. Yes, he affirmed his
Uh,
sanctity by not letting Moses and Aaron into Canaan. Meribah now is like, it's not like this was a great time, but now it's y'all suck. Meribah was a bad day. Like bad day
right.
in Meribah. Okay. Like very different, but the same name, right? But
Mhm.
very different heaviness to it. Okay.
Is that what
So
Maribub translates to? Does it mean quarreled or tested
yeah,
or
something like that. I mean, I'll
something
get
like
you the main, I'll get you the thingy here. And what's that mean? Maribah, proper noun. Yes, I know. Um,
bitter
yeah,
something?
something like that. Something. Yeah,
Something.
something like that. But also, yeah, I mean that's sometimes the names are just weird like that. But
Something. Yeah.
right. So in the first, it's like the place is named Masan Meribah, and then the second time it says those are the waters of Meribah, which is different, right? Than which are the waters? The waters that came out of the rock. The
Mm.
Was there a river there now? I don't know, right? But they had to come up with something in that way. But overall, what we're looking at here, guys, is someone seeing a story that they liked the idea of. They take it and run with it in Numbers, and they make some big meta narrative changes. They make a little changes here and there of expanding it a little bit, changing things a little bit. Some of it's good writing, some of it's not such good writing. But that is like motif adaptation. So then when we get into these conclusions, right? Here is what you should do when you encounter stories that look similar, okay?
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
Torah, in the Bible, and out, okay? Ask yourself these questions. What is the purpose of the story? The purpose of the story in Exodus, is it particularly clear? I don't know. Kind of. It's about maybe Moses looking like he's in charge in front of the elders, maybe, right? The purpose of the Numbers story is very clear. Miriam is dead. Moses and Aaron are not getting into Israel. Very clear, right? Very big purpose. It's a little wishy-washy in Exodus, right? So sometimes a good story the first story didn't necessarily have a purpose. It was just a good story, right? But then they took it, the motif, and put it to use and said, here's what we're going to do with it, and here's the purpose, okay? But you should ask yourself, when you're looking at two stories like this, what's the purpose of them, right? And then use the swap out method, like we did, right? What can you swap and what can you not swap, right? What are the things that work with the meta narrative and don't? We can't swap out Miriam's dead because she shows up in Exodus 18, so we can't kill her off in Exodus 17. But we can put her there in Numbers. We can swap the embellishment of the figs pomegranate thing. We could do that. That's no big deal. We can swap that they complain to Moses and Aaron, both of them, I guess. We can't swap out the tent of meeting. It hasn't been built yet, right? We can't swap out the geography because they're in different places. But there are things that we can, right, that are simply stylistic that we can. So when you're reading two stories, you have to ask yourself, is it stylistic or does it have an effect on that purpose, right? And when we change them, would they have an effect on the meta narrative or not, right? Okay, so that's those are the tools that I want to give you. Now, here's the fun part. What happened with these two texts? Okay, is there theory one? Theory one is that there was a Near Eastern legend about water coming from a rock. Both these authors read it and used it, right? This one here. Both these authors knew about it and used it. And they both got in the canon. Possible. Okay, possible. Another, which one that I prefer, is that there was a Near Eastern legend about rock and water. Exodus author used it. Numbers author used the Exodus one, which means the Numbers author didn't necessarily know the Near Eastern legend, but he had Exodus in front of him, right? And the third theory is just that the author just came up with it. And then the Numbers
just
one
like
was like, I like this. Listen, that's possible. We have seen so many times that Near Eastern legends are everywhere and we can track them. Ryan, you do it all the time in terms of this is this, and we see this, and Asherah and Baal and all whatever it is, right? In Ugaritic text, it is possible that we have lost a Ugaritic or Egyptian legend about rocks and water, or just haven't found it yet. Or it is also possible that the author of Exodus 17 came up with it on his own and wrote this awesome story about how they got water in the wilderness. And Numbers was like, I like it, but I'm going to put it to a purpose. I'm going to adapt this and put it into use because we need to get rid of Miriam. We need to get rid of Moses. We need to get rid of Aaron. And I'm running out of time. Let's use a complaint scene. There's plenty of complaint scenes. Let's make them do a major faux pas, apparently, that they've never
And
done
then
before, never talked about before, never talked about again, but it's the faux pas of faux pas, right?
right.
More likely, it's the bottom one. More likely, there is some sort of Ugaritic, Egyptian, Babylonian, some sort of legend about water coming from a rock, that Exodus 1 or Exodus 17 got from it, built this beautiful story, changed the characters' names, and threw it in there. Because we should
Yeah.
remember that the wilderness narrative, if this was the plan, right? Right. You need a lot of filler of stories from Exodus
True.
to Numbers.
You
Okay. To
got
Deuteronomy.
40 some
Right.
odd years, man. You
Right.
gotta fill that up. That
So what
can't be like one
scholars
page.
Right, exactly. So what scholars call this is the repository, meaning that Numbers, Exodus through Numbers, is the editors and redactors and stuff, they theorize, what we'll suggest to you is that they took all of these other legends that they had and threw them in there, like the one about the snakes, right? The one about it
Yeah.
raining bread, the one about like there's all kinds of weird stuff that happens in the wilderness because they needed
Okay. That
filler
makes
time, right? And so it is possible that they needed filler to get from here, right, the wilderness of sin, to get from Elim to Sinai. They weren't quite ready to get to Sinai yet. So they're like, let's put in I know this awesome story about rock and water, whatever it is. And then they go all the way up here and we're like, hey, we still need some stuff, but we're getting super close to Deuteronomy, man. We need to get rid of some people. So right here is where they choose to say, look, before we pop over over there, we need to knock some people out, which to me is much more fun of the ideas of looking at this stuff than just, I don't know what people would thought that God wrote it and got bored and wrote it twice or whatever. So yeah. Due to these are great questions you're
Oopsie.
asking.
This is a really good question.
That's a great question. There have not been any that have been found that I am aware of at this point. That being said, there are stories about rocks. There are stories about water in Ugaritic stuff and Egyptian stuff.
L lives at the source of two rivers.
Correct.
That's where he lives. He on a mountain.
Right.
And his
Mountains are
mountain
big.
is
Right.
So that's a big rock with water coming
Big
from
rock
it.
with water. It's possible. So my guess is I would suggest to you that that there is a lost legend about it that we just don't get to see. All we get to see is the adaptation of it. The reason why I suggest that is because very little amount of these stories in the wilderness narrative, the wilderness repository, are unique, are original, as we have seen. So my money is on an adaptation from some sort of Near Eastern legend. We can't prove that yet, but we have an idea that that's kind of what it would be. But either way, what we have is two stories that look way too similar to have been created by coincidence or whatever it is. Clearly they knew about each other. And then what we're doing is we're structuring how they interacted with each other. They interacted with each other through motif adaptation, meaning they kept certain elements and they left certain elements off or whatever it is. But the way that you have recognized a motif is by reading them both. You would not have recognized any of them if you'd read them separately. And that's the lesson. That's the lesson in terms of motif adaptation.
That was
when
perfect.
You read things that you go, wait a minute, I remember this. This looks like this. Think motif adaptation. Don't think coincidence, because there are no coincidences. think motif adaptation. And so this one, and then some other ones that I'll do in a couple weeks, will continue with that sort of story. But you have just recognized, in the most simplest terms, a motif adaptation from Exodus 17 to Numbers 20 because you saw them both. And that's what I wanted to put forth to you guys tonight.
That was great, because doing that synoptically, like you've said, just looking at them side by side, you see what was kept, and then, what they built upon. Sometimes we don't know why they did what they did. I mean, but
Right.
it
The why
it
is like
fits the
fun,
purpose. Yeah, but
yeah. But remember, the questions that we shouldn't be asking, right, is, did it happen? Who cares? Here's what we've got. Like, that's not the right question, right? Stu, you got these questions are awesome, man. It is possible that one day in the wilderness is a genre marker, but what I would say is the genre marker is most likely the complaint. Is that the people were thirsty or something like that, right? Is that we're getting into a complaint scene is how it would be the literary trope, would be the genre marker. Because one day in the wilderness, we're already in Numbers, right? And so, or we're already in Exodus. So in theory, you already know you're in the wilderness. But what is happening in the wilderness? What genre within the wilderness are we in? We're in a complaint scene, right? That would be my suggestion. Any last sort of questions?
just because Stu asked that, this might not have anything to do with it, but I know that there is a wilderness and what's the word I'm trying to, not feast, but like oh gosh, yeah, I can't even get it out. It's like the contrast of being in wilderness, not having anything, but then there's oh my god, I can't. I've
Are you
talked
speaking about
about this.
Sukkot? Are you talking
I'm
about
not
Sukkot?
sure.
The
Maybe
feast, the feast of booths, where we build the booths in the tabernacle and in the wilderness.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, then you
I
tell
was
me.
I was thinking of like feast and famine. I wonder if I have it in my
Ooh,
notes, but it probably would. Let me just search
cool.
wilderness and
Right.
see if because I've come across this whole thing in the Ugaritic texts with
Right.
the Shahar and Shalim epic, with them being in the wilderness, but then them having this place of um I can't. What is wrong with me? I can't
Dude,
even
it's
remember the
awesome.
word
I want it.
of
Like, I'm
being
thirsty for it.
fulfilled, where they get all their needs met in this
Yeah,
sanctuary. So
that's
there's this.
rad.
Okay.
That's so cool. Yes. Yes. Bring that next time and tell me, because like that's awesome.
Okay.
Stu
I'll
says
have to
oasis.
do.
Is it an oasis? Is that what
Yeah, that's
you're
kind of what I'm
Hey, all
what
right.
I'm
Stu's on
thinking
it.
of. But
Okay.
yes, there's just meant to be this stark contrast, and I know it's come up with. I think even in the New Testament and whatnot. It's something that I've looked into before, but it's not obviously a
Whoa.
motif that I know very well. But I'll look into it.
Look into it, because if there is that Ugaritic motif of wilderness, famine, and needs, right, in terms of
Mhm.
we see that quite often in the repository of the wilderness narrative. And so that would be an amazing paper to write about here's the idea of the wilderness narrative and the complaint scenes inside. Maybe we can't point to the specific Near Eastern legends that they're pulling from, but we can see the genre of famine and need, divine intervention with
Mhm.
need shaping those stories. That would be super rad. So please bring that next time. That
Okay,
would be amazing.
I got you.
This is
I
why
mean, that's
this is
some of
why
my
you're here,
favorite
dude.
stuff. So
This is why you're here. Okay? This is why she's here, because she's got
awesome.
awesome stuff like this that I don't know yet. I'm super excited. Okay.
Oh, thank
Love that stuff.
yay!
Awesome. So, friends, it is 9:09, but we will see you next week. Same time, same bad time, same bad channel.
That's right.
Ryan's going to take the lead next week. I'm super excited about what you will bring, and we will let you know throughout the week. But thank you for your questions and your comments and your presence and being 69 of you. So,
Yes.
yeah. Yes. So, yeah.
What else? Do I have anything else to add? No, just that we'll be here next week. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Stuart, thank you for everybody. Thank you for any of your input. That's awesome. And make sure you bring questions for me next week, man. Y'all need to bring
Yeah.
more questions.
Dude,
Start
bring
bringing those damn
questions.
questions.
Ryan's stuff
I need
is
to flex this
rad. That's
muscle.
why we're doing it. Do it. Flex that stuff. She's got awesome stuff, which is why I'm here learning too. So,
Thank you.
friends, countrymen, thank you. You're awesome.
We'll see
Talk to
ya.
you soon. Okay.
Bye. Yay. Thank